Welcome to the Swedish Nationality Room at the University of Pittsburgh. In this video, I will describe some aspects of the room and discuss one particular artistic detail. This room was dedicated in 1938. It is one of the first nationality rooms completed. The first four nationality rooms came about in 1938 in addition to the committee-less early American room. The Swedish room is based upon Swedish farmhouse architecture that the architect Linton Wilson saw at the Skansen Museum in Stockholm. Various old cottages inspired him to reproduce the effect in Pittsburgh. Skansen, founded in 1924, gathered together the fading rural characteristics in Sweden as it moved steadily towards an industrialized modernity. The open-air museum and zoo still exist and is a popular attraction. Several structures and various decorations were copied or reinterpreted for use in this room. The fireplace is a copy of one such cottage's fireplace, and the bricks used here are centuries-old Swedish bricks, whitewashed many times. The pitched ceiling is a reminder of the steeply sloped roofs of such homes, while the fir wood wainscoting and herringbone-patterned brick floor are other reminders of traditional materials. Finally, even the oak furniture has a Swedish connection, having been made by a Swedish man in Philadelphia. Paintings that decorate the room are of particular interest. There are allegories of justice, judgment, and knowledge on the wooden ceiling. The painter was a Swedish man named Ole Nordmark. They are inspired by the 18th century folk painter Gustav Reuter, some of whose work is found in the Skansen structures. In the rear wall, one can see an image of the three wise men on the way to Bethlehem. They are accompanied by St. Catherine. The Magi are dressed in Swedish costume of the 18th century. These are not historically accurate pictures. They prance about on what appears to be a stage, heightening the decorative aspect. Above them are cherubs, shown with just heads and wings. That is an old way to show one of the order of angels. From the Renaissance onwards, there has been a blurring between cherubim and cherubs, as in the plump babies with and without wings. The ceiling, by contrast, shows one of the seraphim, Angel Gabriel, blowing his trumpet on Judgment Day. Nordmark included funny errors in his paintings, perhaps as reminders of our own weaknesses and foibles, to be repaired and improved upon. One of the Magi is going in the opposite direction from his companions. Justice is not blindfolded, Gabriel has two left feet, and St. Catherine, as the allegory of knowledge, has two devices for writing that cannot be used together, a chalkboard and a quill pen. Nordmark worked in Sweden as a muralist and scenic artist until 1924. He had studied throughout Europe, but in that year emigrated to the United States. He became an art teacher, teaching fresco painting among other techniques to a generation of artists, such as Reginald Marsh, Henry Varnum Poor, and George Biddle, who would all distinguish themselves through federal art projects under the auspices of the Works Project Administration's Public Arts Commission. Nordmark also gained work during this period, teaching for the Department of the Interior's Bureau of Indian Affairs. For them, he was sent to Oklahoma to teach Native American artists the same fresco and tempera techniques. One of his famous students was Allen Hauser. A visit to the Department of the Interior, or Department of Justice, Washington, D.C. office buildings, contains works by all of these named artists. In 1947, Nordmark wrote a practical instruction manual on how to make a fresco painting for the American Artists Group publications. And indeed, the mural in the rear of the room is a fresco secco. Specifically, that is a painting done on already dry plaster. This is different from painting upon wet plaster, wherein the pigment is intimately bonded to the drying plaster. A fresco secco is not so intimately bound to its plaster substrate, so flaking can often occur. One of the ways to see the different types of fresco paintings is to examine its crack patterns. It is not a total way to prove one from the other, but it is instructive to notice. True fresco will show cracks along the seams where one day's plaster abuts another day's work, which in Italian is called the giornate, the day's work. Cracks across the fresco may just be cracks unassociated with the order in which parts of the image were painted. We see a number of those type of cracks in this fresco. The fresco process involves applying the lime plaster to a mortar undercoating, leveling with trowels and wooden floats, pouncing a charcoal dust through pinpricks in the full-scale outline drawing, called a cartoon, which is held against the fresh plaster, and then finally applying the pigments which have been mixed with water. Secco painting waits until the leveled undercoating is dry and the pigments are mixed with lime plaster wash, a supersaturated plaster mix. That is applied and the medium bonds to the previous dry wall. Other aspects, like the cartoon transfer, are all the same in secco. It is a deliberate technique that also must take into account which pigments can survive the extreme alkalinity of the plaster. Sometimes in the chemical history of pigments, artists could not use the pigment they really wanted and had to resort to applying some lime plaster sensitive pigments a secco in hopes that they would not change color. One can see this in an excellent fresco copy of a Giotto painting in the Frick Fine Arts Building, where the bright green, a copper acetate, has flaked off for a lack of chemical binding to the undercoat of plaster and had darkened due to the destructive aspects of the air. So in these Nordmark murals, we see a limited palette to deal with the necessary limitations of the medium. This is just one small aspect of the Swedish Room, but it illuminates an interesting intersection of art and American history during the years of the Great Depression, when artists worked to decorate our public buildings with art that extolled virtues and called back to centuries-old practices. When you visit this room, look for Ollie Nordmark's signature in the upper right of the frescoed wall. The two images at the end of the video are from Nordmark's book, showing the progress of painting a fresco. They are a self-portrait.